So, welcome everyone. I had to put the microphone on 10 because it's the only way to get over the noise. I thought I'd do a small, specialized track. Don't have to confront too many people. I was wrong. But welcome anyway. Let's first start to introduce myself. Does it work? So. I'm Roald Kruit. I'm the guy that Derek referred to as shouting towards laptop. I'm not always shouting towards my laptop, so don't worry. And I'm here to tell something about digital transformation. As a founder, I have many hats within the organization. I'm involved in product management, strategic alliances. But one of my favorites is the digital transformation practice. Because I think that's where we add most value towards our customers versus anything else. And if we go back to the slide where Derek started, innovation happens when people with ideas and technology come together. That's where we started. This was our philosophy. It's a very simple sentence, but there's a lot behind it, which I'd like to a little bit elaborate upon. So when we talk about innovation, we always like to refer to Uber. We even make a word out of it, to Uberize, or Netflix, or Airbnb, these huge disruptive innovations which kills industries, it changes the way we work. However, the majority of those innovations are not like Uber. There are different sort of innovations. They're classified, that this is a model I typically like to use. You have disruptive innovations, which tend to disrupt markets and the way we work. We have breakthrough innovations, which are enabling us to build new innovation on top of it, like IoT, like the iPhone. We have new market innovation, where we take existing ideas into a new market and slightly apply it in a different way. But the majority of the innovations are basically called sustaining or incremental innovations. We improve a product a little bit. We improve a process a bit. But by constantly improving it, we in the end make big innovations. But it does happen at a different pace. So one of my favorite quotes is one of MIT. It's actually derived from Schumpeter. Is that innovation happens when a business person with a problem meets a technical person who knows how to fix it with technology. It's about bringing those two worlds together. However, if we look at today's organizations, it's most often more like this. We have the business, and they have all sorts of demands, etc. Every entire different IT department. Often they are in India or somewhere in the basement. And the one is frustrated, they don't get what they want. The other is frustrated because they can't deliver for all sorts of reasons, where they don't have the right people or process or platform. It's hard, what Derek already mentioned, it's hard to innovate. And I use the same slide as Derek here, so there's a little bit of overlap. There are all sorts of challenges, skills or resources, funding and budgets. It's a very hard one, actually. I think culture, probably the hardest to change. Business IT alignment. Technology is actually number 5, so only 9% of considered to be a problem. That's also the reason for us to invest in this practice, because Derek told about bimodal and a mode 2 and a mode 1. But when I looked at it, it's actually how we have developed with the Mendix since the start. We tried to call it the Mendix Rapid Application Delivery Method. No one bought it. Then we adopted Agile, we adopted DevOps, but so everyone talks about it, but actually we have years and years of experience in doing this. So why not set up a practice to share this experience, what we've learned from our customers, and make sure that our customers don't make the same mistakes and guide them towards the journey. So Derek showed the 4P model, and I go a little bit more in depth than Derek, and there are different dimensions, especially also depending on the stage you are. In the start, you address them differently than its structure, than its skill. But a few things I would like the people to start thinking about. If you look at portfolio, as Derek said, and we saw it at KLM, the people who know the problems are probably the people doing the work. It's a workforce. It's not in an innovation center where they know the problems. So how do you get those ideas out of your workforce into a process? Most organizations don't have a process for it, don't have a go-to person. And where do you get funding for those ideas? To at least validate whether it's a valid idea. And I went to some organizations, and before they can actually start writing the first line of code, they have delivered 36 design documents, which probably is much more expensive than just building the first app, before they actually can get started. So the process we have built are cumbersome, what we do. So we need a new way of ideation and a process support to get those ideas, and it can be brainstorm sessions. And one of my favorite examples is a customer what they call the ID factory. If you have a good idea, any employment within the organization, if its manager also thinks it's a good idea, you automatically get the budget for a one-day feasibility study. Just a checklist, does it make sense, can we execute, etc. When it's a positive result, you automatically get a budget for a prototype. So they spent 5 days designing the process, building an app, and then showcase it. And then with that prototype, you have at least process description, you have a working version, and you can start shopping for budget. Another one idea which I really liked, which was very successful, is the concept of crowdsourcing. They built a Mendix app where they said, hey, we have this idea, this is roughly what we think we need to build it within Mendix. Who wants to chip in? And they funded 20 apps this way, without having to go to the board asking for budget. We saw the same with another customer, which had a centralized IT department, but all separate business units. With all those business units, it basically had the same problem. So instead of trying central budget, just say, hey, we have this idea, who wants to chip in? So it's a complete new way of funding, of managing your portfolio. But the biggest challenge is, where do we start? And in the end, I think it's more about the experience of people. How do we improve their ways of working, improve our interaction with the customers? And to actually put that experience first, I like to work with an experience board where we say, okay, there are a number of things we look at. Which people, both on stage, so the people which we actually confront, and backstage, the people who have to support them, are involved. Which actions do they take? Which things do they have? And how can we support that? And how can we create a journey? And an example which I want to give, which is relatively to do with digital, but I really like it, is about MRI scans. So this is the experience for a small child which has to go to an MRI scan, which is horrified of the machine, the noise, etc. But bring it in a situation where it feels like he goes to camp or camping. This is experience. And thinking that way first, this is how you differentiate, this is how you improve, this is how you innovate. So it's just something to think about, because we are very good at writing requirements, etc., but we rarely think in experiences and how people use the software. Second, people. And most people think about people are the people actually building the software. However, the most important in my experience is executive sponsorship. We're going to do things differently. And without the right sponsorship on the highest level, you walk into walls, against ceilings, you get stuck somewhere in the process. Doesn't get priority, they don't want to change existing processes. And it's not just our experience. Look at McKinsey. Involvement from company leaders is critical. 2/3 of the high performers say the CEO is personally sponsoring digital initiatives at the companies. So it's all the way up to the top. I have companies seen that board, sometimes CEO -1, but if it's below, you're already basically set up for failure. And it sometimes are the smallest things. We had to do a project, where a big business case, where we can save tens of millions of euros every quarter. And we had a case where we want to deliver the application within 2.5 months. However, we need to integrate with SAP. And in order to get our flying expert who could build the SAP integration, get access to the system, we needed to have 12 signatures to get this clearance, normally taking 4 months. Then I wrote an email to the CIO. This process is going to cost you $40 million. Is this really worth it? We got signed off within a week. So it are sometimes the small things you don't foresee where sponsorship is very critical. If we evaluate a project, I always ask, okay, which impediments did you get into within the organization, so outside of your own team, and how was the sponsor involved in solving those? And it's already, if you do the first presentation or the first kickoff, even if the CEO is there for 5 minutes, it gives a signal that, guys, this is important. It might be a small project, and it might be a first start, but this is the beginning of a much bigger journey as an organization. And people get a different modes as soon as the CEO speaks, even if it's just 5 minutes. So the second challenge, talent. And there's a sort of paradox in there, because it's hard to find talent. However, digital attracts as well. And this is a poll I really like. It says, how important is it to work for an organization that's digitally enabled or a digital leader? And over all ages, more than 75% answered very or extremely important. So one of the things we do when we sit with a customer and say, hey, I can't find the right people, say, okay, how do you sell your company? Do you know it's a buyer's market? There are 10 times more vacancies for developers than there are developers. 10 times. So if you have a hiring process which takes you 3 months, you won't hire any talent person. If you find one, you get him in within a week. And you have to sell your company. He can choose, not you. It's a complete way around. And you have to sit with HR to understand that. If you write a job profile, it has to be an advertisement for your company instead of all the checkboxes where someone should require to. And within Mendix, we have a very simple rule. Not more than 3 requirements can be formulated in any job profile. So I always challenge people, what are the 3 most dominant requirements you look into people? It's rarely skills, it's more about attitude. And the rest will filter out itself. Therefore, you have a process. But don't let your developers jump through hoops and really try to sell it. If you can articulate your vision for digital very well, it helps you to attract good developers. And I always get a question, what is a good developer or a good person? I think there's one dominating factor, which is, I like to quote Thomas Edison, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% preservation. You need a can-do attitude. You will walk into all sorts of obstacles within the organization, people who don't like it, people who feel threatened. And if you get, with the first obstacle, you think, oh, this is not going to work, and you sit down, it's over. You need people which just go and find a way to make one. And if you then look at the third P, process, we used to look at software as a project. We build it, it's finished, we put some maintenance budget, similar like we build a house or any other building. But today's software, if you want to be agile, you should not look at it as a project. You should live it as a living organism. You have to feed it, and it grows. If you don't feed it, it will die. It's as simple as that. So you have to constantly improve the way you work. And it also means you can start small. That doesn't have to be finished from the first release. Actually, you learn really what you need to build once you have built it, not during the process itself. The earlier you can release, and don't have to release it to the entire world, it can be a very small group, you get the first real feedback. And many people think they're about agile, but it's much more than just agile. It is how do you involve your business stakeholders. You can do agile in India and never have any developer meet any business person. That's not going to work. They have to sit in the same room. That's where you get the synergy. There you get the ideas. That's where you have all those features which no one really thought of. Just, hey, is that a problem? I can fix it in 5 minutes. And all those quick wins you gain if you really work together. It also means that the business has to be aware that it takes them much more time than they used to. And some practical advice normally I'll give, make sure you have like a coffee break session. So when do you drink coffee? At 11. Can we, during your coffee break, walk in and ask some question? We develop so quickly that if you have to wait 2 weeks before we can validate an assumption, there's an equivalent of 2 months in Java development. So if we can just walk by every week, every day, for 5 minutes during your coffee break and ask you 2 or 3 questions. By the way, I can immediately show you what I've built. You get excited, you get the interactions, and it doesn't have to cost you that much time. It's more about the interval than that spent time. Also, if you look at Agile, Scrum is basically the most popular method of Agile. There are a few differences, and I'd like to highlight three of them. So first, the teams are much smaller. The bigger the team, the higher their overhead, the less you get creativity. If you work with 20 people, it's much harder to get the synergy than with 2 or 3 people. So smaller teams are much more effective than larger teams. That means that the self-fulfilling concept, which Agile or Scrum says that teams should be self-fulfilling, is something which I don't believe in. Because if I want to have a self-fulfilling and I want to do something about UX or something about the integration, it doesn't have to be there the entire project. Just fly them in when you need them, and let them go, and have that small core team which works with the business. That's your full-time team. It also, if you want to go to monthly sprints, it's way too long. It should be maximum 2 weeks, purely because of the speed you can build it. But a lot of organizations already are pretty good at Agile, and business stakeholder involvement is also people where I don't see a lot of people struggling with. But the DevOps is probably one of the biggest challenges. Because suddenly, where we used to have 2 different departments, the development department and the operation departments, those 2 merge. And then suddenly people become scared, they get it to their domain. So this is one of the biggest challenges, but I think it's necessity to do that. And one of the things I always give as advice, describe the value of time to market. What is the value of releasing it a week earlier or a month earlier? Because then you can have a discussion why you want to change it. You have to change the organization. But if you change the organization because of changing it, and you can't articulate it, why, you will get a huge amount of resistance. If you can explain, hey, this is the value for this application, time to market, then at least you get a real discussion. One of the things I always like is, for example, the release frequency at Netflix is a board decision. They decide how often they want to release. So important is it. It's not something which is decided by a project team. No, they say, same at Spotify, we want to do multiple small releases every day. And one of the things I like about Spotify, they introduced the concept of limited blast radius. So instead of trying to put all sorts of preventive controls in there to avoid something goes wrong, they say, no, we release small features very often. We measure it in a small group whether it works, and if it doesn't work, we can roll back it very, very quickly. So the impact, financial and reputation-wise, is very, very small. So you go to, instead of preventive controls, you go to detective and reactive controls, which are much more efficient, but it's a completely different way, because as humans, we like to prevent everything. But the sum of all the prevention of everything that can go wrong is probably more costly than the effect we trying to get on later time to market. And lastly is the governance. Traditionally, we have governance. We say, okay, we make a design. We have a group of wise people looking at the design, the architects and operation managers, etc. And they say, okay, this is a good design. This is quality work. And then we start building, and then we validate where we build according to what's the design. And then we get a sign-off. We say, okay, this is quality software. Doesn't work if you don't even know what you want to build. So the whole paradigm of doing a design authority, making a design, validate it, becomes different. You have to start working with guidelines, saying, hey, this is the area in which you can work, and as soon as you pass this guideline, you need an architectural approval. But you need to measure it lifetime. That's one of the reasons why we launched AQM, Application Quality Monitor. We can do every day measure the quality of the software, and just say, if you go below this rating, we have to discuss it. And it works very, very well. So, last, and this is something where Anno will have later on the presentation. I'm not going to dip. You need an entire architecture. So this is a reference architecture we've been developing about how different components like cloud, apps, IoT, algorithms all work together. Sorry. And it's a lot. So it's very hard to make one two-dimensional picture of all the components and all the interactions. If you would really make it something which is closer to reality, you probably get like a Dead Star, but that's very hard to, to present. So what we will do during one of the sessions is zoom into specific relationships and demo how it works. And, but it is important that you understand that in order to be innovative, you need multiple technologies, like Derek mentioned. So this slide, Derek already elaborated a lot during his presentation. But the start small and celebrate success is essential. I've seen a lot of companies struggling because they make things too big. And then you get discussions over hypothetical situations, which are almost impossible to get a winner because they're hypothetical. And it takes too long before you get any delivery, and by the time you come to a consensus, probably the project already killed the program because there were no results. So it starts, simplicity is success. I like this picture of these bikes, and the essence of this picture is there are no, I don't know, toppers, please someone translate them, pedals. Because it's too difficult for the child to handle a bike with pedals. But comparing to walking, it's a huge improvement. It's not a finished bike by far, but it's a very, very good step in between. And so the trick is to find that first start project. And Derek said, ideally you can build it in 30 days. A few other characteristics I would like to highlight. So very important is there should be a clear appetite to take it into production. Otherwise, it will be the prototype, and we'll never get, well, yeah, of course you can build a prototype. It's not real. So only when it's becoming into production, it becomes real. And then it becomes a showcase. It's very important. There should be, ideally, what I call a wow factor within the application. So the application by itself could be a wow factor. It could be a feature. What do I mean with a wow factor? A wow factor is something which has high impact, but was not expected. Because if something has a high impact, but it has been expected, it was just simply a must-have criteria. If it was unexpected, but had low impact, it's like, yeah, neat, but who cares? So in order to get that wow factor, that buzz around where people start talking about, did you see that application? You need to have something with high impact, which people did not expect. But in the end, and that's, I think I really loved what KLM, Hans said, just do it. And one of my favorite quotes is from Platus. One eyewitness weighs more than 10 hearsays. Seeing is believing the world all over. And there's a movie I'd like to share with you which illustrates that. So what they're going to do the experiment of Galileo, where they're going to drop a feather and a heavy object in a vacuum. Probably you all did it at high school. Difference here, they're going to do it at massive scale. So they're going to do it in a NASA space station. And the fun thing which about the movie is look at the reactions of the people there. So just be aware, this is NASA, this is top of the top PhD physics. It's a very simple experiment which we did hundreds of years ago. Everyone knows what is going to happen. There's no surprise, there should be no surprise. But look at the face when it actually happens.
This is NASA's Space Power Facility near Cleveland, Ohio, and it is the world's biggest vacuum chamber. It's used to test spacecraft in the conditions of outer space, and it does that by pumping out the 30 tons of air in this chamber until there are about 2 grams left. And it's kind of got an eccentric construction, which is part of its history. It was built in the 1960s as a nuclear test facility to test nuclear propulsion systems, and that meant that they built it out of aluminium to make the radiation easier to deal with. Aluminium is not the best thing, the strongest material to build a vacuum chamber out of. So they built an outer concrete skin, which is part radiation shielding and part an external pressure vessel, so that this thing can take the force that's present on the outside when it's pumped out to the conditions of outer space. Galileo's experiment was simple. He took a heavy object and a light one and dropped them at the same time to see which fell fastest. Now in this case, the feathers fell to the ground at a slower rate than the bowling ball because of air resistance. So in order to see the true nature of gravity. We have to remove the air. It takes 3 hours to pump out the 800,000 cubic feet of air from the chamber.
Okay, we dropped 2 millitorr in the last 30 minutes.
But once it's complete, there's a near perfect vacuum inside.
6104 manual, 10% open. Station 1, go for drop. PCV 30-1, pressure set point at 240 psi. We are go for drop.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4. Cameras on. 2, 1. Release.
They came down exactly the same. Wow.
Look.
Watch right there. Look at how they hit right there.
Exactly.
You're back on the side.
Exactly the same.
Feathers don't move, nothing.
Look at that. That's just brilliant.
So that's just brilliant, and everyone knows what's going to happen. And even I looked at you in the audience, I saw a number of people smiling when it actually happened what they expected. It's the power of seeing, which is hardwired in our brains, and that's why you just have to start. So how can we help you to get started? And to do this, we developed a starter package. And why do you need a starter package? So a lot of questions which, if you have the guts to do this, people will fire upon you around the entire organization. Great story, but we're not ready for this, or are we ready for this? Or where can I find the right people? And what's the best project? And and if we start, how do we really work together? So there are all sorts of questions launched at you in order to start. So with our starter package, we want to do a number of things. First, we help you with selecting the right project. And it can be creative sessions, we can challenge you and work out a business case, because it's so important to be able to state the value in order to create excitement. We help you with onboarding, so we prepare the entire project. But even more important is a kickoff, because suddenly you have to work differently with your colleagues. You have to work together in the same room or see each other every 15 minutes and have weekly review meetings, etc. And you start to work with people which you never have worked for. So you need someone to say, hey, this is the rules of engagement. This is how we work together. And we do actually start to formulate the first user stories during that first session. And then you see how people will start to realize how big this communication is. Oh, this is what I wrote down. Oh, this is what I meant. And by doing such an exercise together, you see that people already start moving towards each other. So such a kickoff is a very, very powerful tool to get started. Because that misalignment or the misfrequencies will otherwise be paid back 100 times during the project, even if it's a project of 30 days. It's team enablement, so people need to learn how to use Mendix. And even though you can learn the tool within a few days, there are a lot of best practices, patterns. We have an app store with hundreds of widgets. Before you know all the widgets and patterns, it takes you a bit longer than 3 days introduction training. So put someone in the team which has that experience, has that knowledge, and do on-the-job training. So it's a combination of training, on-the-job, quality assurance, etc. Everything to make this team as productive as quickly as possible. But also a project retrospective, because I can tell you one thing, your first project, even though it's successful, it won't be flawless. You will have rooms for improvement. And we have a whole set of questions we will ask to create an awareness of things where you can improve. Even if you think you did a very good job, you can say, hey, I think there's even still room for more improvement. You can do even more. So and if you try to do it yourself and you think we're very happy, you get this positive reinforcement, but you won't be really critical. So it helps to have a third party saying, hey, these are the things we normally look at, and this is the benchmark, so you think you did a good job. I actually went to a German company, which they were very, very happy, and they were not even half as productive as the average of our customers. So they say, hey, there's so much more room. So it helps to basically put a mirror. But I think maybe the most important is we help you celebrate success. I've seen a lot of people celebrating success. We're bringing cake, and then the entire development team and 2 pictures from the business eating cake, and we're happy. And no one knows the success story. Celebration is about internal PR. Who do we want to know our success? Is it the CEO? Is it the board? Is it other business practice leaders, etc.? So think about a plan. What's the message we're going to tell them? What's the buzz we want to create within the company? It's not something you just do. There needs to be a plan. And eating cake is part of a bigger plan. It's just a way of achieving something. So you have learned a number of things which really work and don't work in celebration of success. And it's so important because this is going to create the budget and the start of a cultural change. And if you can't do this, you probably get stuck, or you keep the best kept secret, or you won't be able to create that organizational change which you're in the end want to achieve. And lastly, get ready for structure. So during that first project, we will learn, and together with our customers, what works, and partners, what doesn't work. So we can create a more tailor-made structure program. Some organizations are much further in DevOps and Agile than others. Some organizations are very good in having a very strong architectural vision, and others are very good on the portfolio side, but are rarely companies which do all 4 Ps instantly according to the book. So after having done this first project, we can much better validate. And we do a number of workshops where we go to all the different topics and say, hey, this is what we see in the project. Is this typical or is it atypical, and why? And we can create a tailor-made structure program. So in the end, I think that we should embrace the opportunity to change. I think from a momentum perspective, I will look how the market and the fact that urbanization has become a verb means that there is a general understanding that we need to change within organizations everywhere. So we should embrace the opportunity, because I think there is not a better momentum than we have today to start these sorts of initiatives. So gain a confidence of such a digital transformation track by executing your first project properly and celebrate success. Learn during that first project and instantly start to think about other opportunities. And one of the big benefits of celebration, which I've often seen, is if you have a big audience, people come to, hey, I have a similar problem. Can you fix it as well? And suddenly you have 3 or 4 quick wins. And budgets and where you can start, and then you get the snowball. And in the end, you need to drive a skill innovation, which actually, as soon as you have the structure in place, is not as hard. The structure phase is in general the difference, because there you get the change within the organization, your process. During skill, you're mostly talking about governance and automation. So how can we automate things which we used to do in the past? So you can do, for example, quality assurance by a number of good people. But if you have 300 projects, it will be very hard to rely on quality assurance purely by expert reviews. So you need different metrics and ways of achieving that. So this is more or less an introduction to the rest of the track. And the last minutes I would like to use to tell a little bit more about the rest of the track which we've assembled for this Mendix World. So we did basically the start and the introduction to the program just now. The next one is how to grow. So how do we grow from start, structure, skills, and what are the key challenges during each phases? And so this is basically going to the entire roadmap and transformation framework. Then we have one session focused on how to make the start stage a success. So how we go in depth on the starter package, do's and don'ts, to create that first success. Next session is, okay, we had that first success, but how do we now create a roadmap and a portfolio to replicate the success? And we talk about budget, and ideation, etc. Once you have a roadmap, you need people. So how do you find the right people to execute this roadmap? Then, once you have the people, you need to apply an agile way of working. So the next session is, okay, we have found a team. How do we then work and embed the processes to make it successful? Then, we have one session about automated testing, because we see that's a very big challenge for a lot of organizations. So we have a specialized session about that. And the last is making digital innovation plug and play. It's about, okay, the reference architecture we have of all the components with big data, algorithms, machine learning, cloud. How do we combine them together from a technical perspective? So that's the most technical session. So that was my presentation for today. We have some time left for questions and answers. Any questions?
We have time for 2 questions.
So, thank you. Hi. So, Roald, we talk a lot about Mode 2 organisations, and Mendix is very much a Mode 2 organisation. A lot of the people here will be coming from what are typically Mode 1 organisations. So, kind of, I appreciate it's going to have to be a sort of pithy soundbite of an answer, but how, what's the best way of getting a Mode 1 organisation to work with Mode 2 digital transformation? Because most of us have got plenty of legacy apps and things like that. They're working mainly Mode 1. So how do we mesh the two together, I guess?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways to answer the question. I think one of the most important thing is you have to avoid us against them, because in the end you have to integrate, you have to work together. So clearly stating the value and the responsibilities of Mode 1 versus Mode 2 is, I think, is the starting point. Yeah. Give both organizations a right of existence. You shouldn't feel threatened. The second thing is, I think the Mode 2 organization should be able to get the pressure of the Mode 1 organization for them to, what Gartner calls, renovate the core. There's a lot of legacy. And in order, if you don't replace the legacy, you will get stuck in the end. So it's not only digital transformation, not only building new apps, it's also replacing your core systems and enabling them to integrate. So I think the bigger picture should be able to give Mode 1 the time to renovate their existing systems and make them ready towards the future. It doesn't really make sense to have a whole lot of application and running on a 40-year-old mainframe in COBOL, because in the end that will get stuck.
Yeah, so I mean, I think you're right, and I think the challenge that we're looking at in LV at the moment is how do we take the best of Mode 1, so the good processes, controls, governance that we already have, but get rid of kind of the red tape and so on that prevents us from doing the Mode 2, the faster market development. So yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so there's only one pitfall with chasing the Mode 1 organization too much. That process hasn't come there for nothing. There's a history about it. And one of the things I always say is at a certain point, the value of an incremental innovation or a new feature does not outweigh the risk of production failure. So if you have a system and every hour the system is shut down, it costs us millions, maybe it's better to do it the conservative way. So you always have to keep making an analysis. What is the value of new features, new releases versus the risk? And at a certain point, we will see that some Mode 2 systems end up being Mode 1 systems, and vice versa. And the risk is if you try to get rid of all the guards that you have in your Mode 1 organization, and then you get the massive production failure, which leads all up the way to the board, that might kill the entire program. Exactly. So you have to be a bit careful by trying to merge them too much together, because both have a right of existence and both have true value towards the company.